Welcome to the persistence, how many potential leads are lost due to insufficient lead follow-up. I am your host, Erroin Martin, joined by Derek Grant. I've got some housekeeping items to go over first, and I'll make some introductions, and we will get started. First and foremost, we are going to be giving a raffle for those who stay to the end. That's right, those who persist through the persistence webinar. As a thank you for attending the entire webinar, 5 people will be entered into a raffle to win a $25 Amazon gift card, and we will follow up with the 5 winners after the webinar. So it pays to stay. If you have some questions, feel free to post them in the upper left-hand side on the question mark icon at the top of the player. And you can ask your question anytime during the presentation. We'll be moderating those questions at the end during the Q&A session between Derek and myself. And that means mom, that's the question mark at the top of the player to leave your question, mom. And if your question's not addressed, a team member from either team will follow up later after the webinar to answer that question. For those of you who are wondering, this is being recorded for posterity's sake. You're all on mute, and I and Derek are the only ones that are talking, so you will be hearing our lovely voice. And then lastly, you'll see the 4 Ps report and the follow-up email. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Derek Grant. Derek leads Salesloft's commercial sales organization, which has delivered an explosive hockey stick growth and earned the number 7 spot on Deloitte's Fast 500 fastest growing companies. They decided not to take the number 1 because they wanted to show mercy to the other 6 on top of them. Prior to joining Salesloft, Derek served as the architect of Pardot's sales process. He was so awesome that Salesforce just bought his process in the exact target purchase. And Derek is a native son of Florida. Now, he holds a bachelor's degree from Florida State University. He has now become my sworn enemy because they defeated my Zags in the Sweet 16. And he's supervised by 3 high-powered executives in his life, his wife, Kelly, and his 2 daughters, Riley and Reese. And as your host and also sort of co-talker on this webinar, I am Erroin Martin. I am the Vice President of Sales for Conversica's technology, financial services, and other vertical. Been 4 years with this wonderful growing company in the AI space, over 20 years of sales experience in various different industries. And when I'm not trying to sell you something, I'm either trying to brew you beer, bake you some bread, or maybe find you if you're lost in the woods as I volunteer for search and rescue in the state of California. Derek, welcome.
Thank you. Very nice to be here. I appreciate you all letting me be part of this webinar to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, which is pleasant persistence, and something I didn't know until right now. So your mom's also on here, so my mom's on here as well, so hopefully I get a thumbs up emoji from her telling me that we're doing a good job. What do you think?
Excellent. Both moms from the South. They're going to do us right. We'll make them proud and be professional gentlemen to both of them. Now, Derek, it is a webinar, and we would not be remiss if we did not do a poll. And we have a poll question for our audience all over the world. How many times do your sales reps try to reach a lead before giving up? Is it 1 attempt, 3 to 4, 5 to 8, 9 or more? Let's be honest, a lot of you don't have any idea out there. We've got some questions coming in. A few more questions. There we go. Not questions, votes. Mom, you only get to vote once. Derek's mom gets to vote twice. All right. And we're going to count down final vote. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let's go ahead and close the poll and look at the results. So I think when we saw that live, there was about, people saying roughly around the 5 to 8 requisite, still some that didn't know and still some that were not doing the requisite number. And it looks like people are sort of stopping a little too soon. Derek, what do we make of that?
Absolutely. And what I'll tell you is the fact that we had so many people say 5 through 8 means that we've got an educated audience who understands the impact of pleasant persistence. And so, these folks are going to help us proselytize why we need to get out there and really make it happen by being persistent with prospects. We're stopping too soon. And the truth of the matter is it has a lot to do with who we're hiring. And you think about sellers, whether it's top of the funnel sellers who are responding to inbound demand whether it's your slick-haired closer that could sell ice to an Eskimo. The folks that we're hiring, generally speaking, for a sales role in the DISC model are going to be D's and I's. They can force you into buying. They can make you love them into buying. And that is the prototype, and it's exactly the right person to work an opportunity. And I think that's where some of the breakdown occurs. Because for all the goodness that is their enigmatic personality, is their ability to have never met a stranger, to be the life of the party, to be able to drive toward a result, what is lost sometimes in that is the fact that they're not necessarily great at process. They're not necessarily great at being thorough. You're more likely to find those people in your accounting or your tech support departments. And so it really has become an epidemic in sales that we have hired all the right salespeople, but then we're surprised when they aren't necessarily persistent and pleasant in their follow-up back to prospects.
Yeah, and if you look at what the studies sort of show from Serious Decisions and other organizations out there, that the average sales rep, not the above average, just the average sales rep, reaches out about 2 times. That means some people do more than 2, and a lot of people do less than 1. And when you look at our own research from Conversica, we've done a sales effectiveness report where we secret shop a number of organizations. This is our 3rd year doing it, and we look at organizations across 9 different key verticals. We look at both enterprise, mid-market, small business, thought leaders, lighthouse accounts in the space. And we looked at about 866 companies this time around, and we found that almost close to 40% never responded back. Not one, not even a smoke signal, not even a telegram to let us know that they got our request to see a demo or be contacted by a sales rep. And what was even more fascinating, but the 62% that did respond, about 540 companies, 63% only gave 1 or 2 attempts. That's pretty much about it. And then the other 37% wanted to reach out and hug us for a very long time. Now, if I was a marketer, I'd be upset with this. I would be really, really mad. They're spending thousands upon thousands, not hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of dollars to generate these leads for some of these organizations, and the reps just aren't really following up. And as a sales leader, if people are complaining about their pipeline and, hey, I don't have enough good stuff coming through, well, then you're not really following up effectively to build that pipeline to get it going. And as a business owner, all this money and people asking for this toy and that software and everything else, and they look at like what's being generated and people aren't following up, I mean, it's kind of hard to hit that number. And it's pretty sad that people aren't doing effective follow-up. So, which leads into, what is the right number, Derek?
Yeah, and that's a great question. The research is really all over the place. What you'll find from InsideSales.com is their research arm found that 80% of sales happen after the 5th contact attempt. If you subscribe to the Bridge Group, they're going to tell you that it takes an average of 7 touches to turn a suspect into a prospect, and it grows to 11 for enterprise level accounts. Or even Topo, who studies inside sales effectiveness, they found that 15 is the optimal number for both inbound and outbound. And you think about it, it's like, why would I need to reach out to an inbound 15 times? Well, the fact of the matter is they don't always jump immediately into your arms on the first contact. But regardless of which you subscribe to, the facts of the matter are that 2, just 100% is not going to get it done. And, as we take a look at the research from Conversica, what you'll find is that companies with the fastest growing revenues are more likely to attempt contact with the lead 5 to 8 times. These are the companies who have got it figured out, right? They've found product market fit. They are at this point hitting the accelerator. They're the ones who aren't letting demand fall on the floor. What they're doing is continuing to double down on this. And so one of the things that I would definitely point to is the fact that we need to be more pleasantly persistent. And this is really the epidemic that we're talking about. Truly, we are not doing a good job of being good stewards of the company's resource, being good partners to marketing, and really doing the thing that will help maximize our variable comp by being pleasantly persistent. So many of us stop short, and that's a huge, huge problem.
Stopping short is a huge problem for sure. And why do we think people are stopping short? I mean, I can think of a number of reasons. Reps are just like over flooded with tons of stuff. They've got lots of different meetings going on. They lots of different ways of doing it. What are some of your thoughts as to why that they're not following up?
Yeah, a couple of things. The one that stands out to me is as we talk about it, sometimes it's our hiring profile. So we don't necessarily hire the people who are thorough in sales. We hire those in different departments to do less customer-facing jobs. But then once we hire them, what do? We give them a comp plan. That comp plan, what does it focus on? It's focused on low-hanging fruit, right? And so if you're telling me I got to reach out 7, 8, 9 times, that sounds like work. They say efficiency is intelligent laziness. And so there's a lot of efficient salespeople out there. And so our comp plan reinforces that they should get the quick win, that they should move on to the next. And so the short-term versus long-term view of a lot of sellers and the way their comp plan is structured is going to cause that to be true. Also, Salesforce did a study recently, and they found that 64% of a rep's day is spent doing non-selling activities. And so, are they not following up because they are being pulled into those meetings you referenced? I think those are really, really difficult as well. So my perception is definitely that we hire people who aren't good at follow-up. We then comp them to not pay attention to follow-up. And then we just pull out of their day, and we have these people, we just literally just suck the time out of their days, and then they then don't have the time to follow up.
Well, don't you think though that sometimes they just don't have the persistent gene inside of them? They just kind of give up a little bit too soon.
You can probably guess, all the people in the audience, that I'm from the South. I'm from Florida, but it's the north part of Florida, which is basically Georgia. And if you're not picking up on the accent, you would probably guess that my family owns a farm, and they do. My uncle actually owns a farm, and it's in Florida, so it's hot. And one summer, I'm a teenager, and he and my dad are out there, and they're men of more advanced age, and they've got me out there digging holes in this red clay to be able to put a fence down. I think I'm going to die. It's 100 degrees, 100% humidity. And I had to go sit down, drink some water. And my uncle and my dad are still out there working. And my uncle at some point looks over at my dad and goes, "That boy's got a lot of quit in him." And I think just like I didn't necessarily have the stick-to-it gene out there on that hot summer day, I think sometimes salespeople don't. But, that's the power of what we're able to do with technology. We're able to help people stick to the script by using platforms like Conversica. And so I think it's really, really important that we not just say like, well, they're not good at follow-up. Hey, you have to be good at follow-up. You have to be in this job. We'll give you platforms and tools to be able to help you and maximize that follow-up.
Well, I think there's also another sort of great way to look at it, and there's a great mind, sort of providing a great quote. And this is who I thought of, essentially as a great mind is, Homer Simpson, right? Something that's hard to do, then it's just not worth doing. I think some people sort of say it that way. But I think there's someone else that you actually you want to reference in a much more serious fashion, which is, I believe you have.
It's
sorry.
Oops, excuse me.
Sorry about that. Nope. There he is. We're having driver problem. Actually, I'll let you do. All right. Exactly right. There we go. Excellent.
There it is. Norman Schwarzkopf, worth the wait. Storm and Norman's comment was, you always know the right thing to do. The hard part is doing it. And I guarantee you, as a sales leader, as a demand gen leader, as an inbound lead response leader, as the VP of sales, if you were to go and put your arm around any of your reps and say, hey, listen, I took a look at the leads from last week, and man, you went a mile wide and an inch deep. I mean, you called them once, emailed them maybe once, hopefully, fingers crossed, because that's the average, right? And you were to say, do you think that's the maximum way to be able to have success with this account? They all would say, no, I know. And if you were to say, man, how do you think marketing feels about that? They would know that what they're doing is not impactful, that it's not really driving results. So they know the right thing to do, but they aren't necessarily doing it. And my perception is that there are a number of things that prevent us from doing the right thing. Erroin, I don't know if you want to maybe talk about those.
Yeah, there are, I think, three really key enemies in any organization that makes it hard to persist. And the first one really comes down to the volume, the number of leads that are being generated on a daily basis by a lot of organizations is a lot to kind of work through. And so what a lot of companies end up doing is they try to automate this process by, putting in some more marketing messages to a lead. And we're really talking about the customer experience, right? You've spent this money to attract this person. This person has gone onto your website or gone and met you at a trade show, or maybe it's one of you guys here attending this webinar and falling asleep to get information. And, all you want is someone to reach out to you after you've raised your hand. And that volume comes through. And on the other side, you've got these sales reps there. And, the best organizations, they've got a sort of customer journey planned out to when the rep's supposed to engage and not engage. But for a lot of them, they really just are a little overwhelmed. They've got a lot of stuff coming in. There's always new stuff. And they kind of always like the new stuff too, right? Because, I mean, come on, if I can get you on that one call, set, that's awesome. I got to do it 8, 9, 10 times. That's really sort of tough. And they may try, other organizations may try to segment it out, and you may not be in the right segment. So there's a lot of things that happen there in that volume play that make it really hard for sales reps and organizations to persist in that lead follow-up. The second piece of the puzzle, it takes time. Someone raises their hand today, and you got to close a deal for end of the quarter, end of month. Well, that person may not be reaching out and talking to you until April, May, possibly June, maybe even July. And it takes time to persist out with that person. And that's just one thing that those D's and I's don't like to do, is they don't like to waste time. It's funny you talk about that DISC profile. D's are the ones that are really super pushy, and, trying to get past you on the interstate as fast as possible. They'll use all lanes, even the breakdown lane, to get past you. And the I's are the ones that are rocking out and just speeding up and right on your bumper till you move over because they've got some place to go. And it takes time to be persistent. And a lot of reps just don't have that time gene built into them. And then the third part, I mean, reps are like squirrels sometimes. They kind of lack focus. It's, if you ever seen a squirrel in the street, left, right, I don't know which way to go. The reality is that that focus there is pretty tough for them to keep. And when you're asking some of these younger kids who they want to move up the ranks really quickly, they're really passionate about what they're doing, it's hard for them to stay incredibly focused. And I think that's where the problems sort of break down. So I got to ask you, Derek, what do you think are some of the solutions to combat this epidemic of poor follow-up?
Yeah, I think that once we identify there's a problem, we can identify exactly why there's a problem. I think now the next piece, if we can all agree that more follow-up is better, if we can agree that reps aren't necessarily getting it done, if we can understand why it is that they're not necessarily knocking the ball out of the park, I think then let's dig in and let's talk about how to combat it. And I think the very first one, and it's a critical one, is that we need to align on a process. I touched earlier on Topo, and Topo said 15 touches, the optimal number of touches for both inbound as well as outbound, because pleasant persistence is the order of the day. And, is each of you in the audience, think about your process. And if your process is one that is refined, then one of two things is happening based on the Conversica data. Number one, either your process is 2 steps, or number 2, your reps aren't running your process. It has to be one or the other, right? And so I think the very first thing to be able to do is to provide the roadmap to make sure that reps know exactly how you'd like each one handled. Because there's a huge customer experience implication here, that if the person's expecting to hear from you or they don't, that's not good. If they reach out and just turns out whenever you call them, they happen to have just stepped out or into a meeting and they don't think to call back, there's a problem there, because marketing spent a ton of time and spent a ton of blood, sweat, and tears to be able to generate this person and handed them over to sales. Now they get lost. So we have to have a process. If you don't have a process, build one, because reps are going to go to the lowest common denominator. Reps are going to go to the low-hanging fruit. Reps are going to call the person just 1 or 2 times for the reasons we talked about before. There's not the time to call them 7th or 8th time. There's all these other leads. It's a great volume that marketing's generating behind us. I don't have time to do that. I'm struggling. I'm drowning, drinking from a fire hose. or they lack focus. So you just got to have a process that you all agree on. And then once you have the process, I think the next part is having an accountability buddy, because you ought to hug your marketer. When we talk about sales and marketing alignment, if what you're dealing with is too many inbound leads, go and find that person right now and hug their neck, because that's a good problem to have. But if you got a process now, you need to agree with them that, look, everything you generate, every one of these Glenn Gary leads, I'm going to treat as the most precious resource that our organization has. And I'll tell you that at Salesloft, not only for inbound, but also for our account-based strategy, I meet with marketing weekly, and they hold me accountable. I don't get to go in there and say, yeah, I know you guys generated a bunch of leads. We chose not to follow up on those. Yeah, we called them once, twice. We marked them non-responsive. Or, yeah, you got these target accounts that you're running direct mail to, that we're sending video to, that we built all these great assets out, that we've got retargeting going, and yeah, we just didn't really get around to calling them this week. That is a level of nonsense that they're not going to stand for. And so one thing I would recommend is, once you have your process, it's critically important that you go out and now own it with your marketing counterpart, own it with your VP of sales, own it with your demand gen person, and make sure that you are truly going out and sticking to it. And then the third, and I think this is something that each and every one of you can also implement, once you've got the process, once you have agreed to the SLA, now get technology that can help you adhere to that. And there's a few different flavors. One that I'd highly recommend is Conversica. I mean, it's powerful whenever someone's coming inbound to make sure they are getting that thorough, persistent process. You're not in the 38% of people who didn't even have the time of their day to follow up. Unbelievable. And you're not in the 68% of people who are just reaching out a couple times, right? Technology like Conversica can make sure that you are being pleasantly persistent with prospects and delivering really an exceptional customer experience. Also, you've got things like marketing automation. Now, I don't love marketing automation as it relates to lead follow-up, and I'll share why I came from marketing automation. I was at Pardot. I love the space. It's something that I was so proud to be a part of. But for all the things it's good at, lead follow-up isn't really one of those things, because they come in and are they an MQL? They're an MQL. They go immediately over to sales. And what do sales do? On average, I call them twice and mark them non-responsive. Awesome. Nailed that one. Or they're below the line, and all right, they're not quite an MQL yet. Let's keep them and let's nurture them. And then what do you deliver? Well, maybe a few days and you deliver a marketing email. Great. I asked to talk to a salesperson, and now I've got a robotic marketing machine sending out messages to me. So I don't love marketing automation for that, but I can tell you, for the 38% of people who didn't even bother to follow up, marketing automation would have been better than what they did. And so that's an option as well. And then I think the third is sales engagement. It's being able to leverage technology in the sales engagement space, which allows you to really codify your go-to-market strategy and be able to say, oh, on day one, we're going to call an email. On day two, we're going to call in the morning, call in the afternoon. Day three, we're going to shoot them a video. On day four, we're going to reply back to the email from day one, and really be able to take the process that you built and make sure that reps are able to run it efficiently, run it effectively, and to be able to have accountability on that. So really three classes of technology that I think you can really leverage to be able to go out and help reps be pleasantly persistent, which is what every lead deserves.
So, Derek, that's excellent. Before we get to questions, actually, I have one question, because being a sales leader at Pardot and being a successful, transition out of that organization, now you're working with one of the top sales enablement tools organizations on the planet. It's amazing what you guys are doing at Salesloft. Looking at those three pieces, right? The process, the SLA, and the technology. As a sales leader, how do you make sure, so some of these other individuals are out there to be future sales leader, how did you make sure you didn't get stuck in, analysis paralysis on the process, yep, or, the finger pointing game on the SLA, or what sort of you guys choose for your stack? So if you could just share, before we jump into questions from the audience, just really quickly your experience, because I got you on the line and I always want to learn from somebody, so I thought I'd ask.
Sure. I appreciate that. So I remember John Miller over at Marketo making a comment one time about over-engineering something. And what he said was, the speed at which you can go to market with like a nurturing program in marketing automation would be, you're going to build a 20-step nurturing program. And what he said is, don't do that, because what you may find is you aren't actually you don't actually know if message 18, 19, and 20 are going to resonate. So his recommendation was start with 3 steps, and then as you see what the responses are to those, go 3 more and see what the responses are to that, and then go 3 more. And his thought was an iterative process. Perfect is the enemy of good, and so I think there is a lot to be said for let's do something, but I don't know that you necessarily on day one have to write out 37 touches, because it'll take you a long time to get to market, and you're still in that 38% where the people are not getting the follow-up they deserve. And so I think that's an important piece. So put something out there. Once you get it out there, iterate it, and I think don't engineer it. Don't over-engineer it, excuse me. Just make it happen, and good things will come. Certainly better things than not following up at all or having scattershot or short 1 to 2 touch follow-up.
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And I always have to think of Mike Tyson's quote about plans. Everyone's got a plan when they get in the ring until they get punched in the face. So we've got some questions. There are a lot of questions. Mom, I'm going to ignore all your questions again because we've got some real people on here. One of the questions comes, John, and I'm sorry, Derek. I don't even know who John is. One of the questions comes from, what kind of phone approach do you recommend once you finally connect with a prospect? I appreciate just sort of shouting at them in sarcastic comments, and I don't know why I don't get sets. But Derek, what are your thoughts on the phone approach once you actually connect?
So my personal perspective is, and the model that I like to follow is a quick intro, then an ego appeal, then a time check, and then 2 quick questions, and then you basically walk them into a corner where they are only going to give one of a couple different responses. And the example of that is hey, Erwin, I understand you're the person in charge of all the technology decisions over at Conversica. And so what have I done? Well, I've said you're smart and pretty and all those different things. And then, yes, you are. And there's only 3 things you can say that: yes, no, or what do you mean? And if you say yes, then I'm going to say, that's awesome. Hey, a couple questions to make sure I'm not barking up the wrong tree. If you say no, I'm going to ask for a referral. And so I think it's having a model to be able to go through. And so once you get on the phone with a gatekeeper, you may say, well, that's great. Hey, listen, they just requested a piece of info. What we like to do is we like to have an executive briefing with them to not only just have the white paper to be able to answer the questions. I think there's ways that you can help get around that gatekeeper in a way that it's going to it's a strategy. You walk them into a position where they only have a couple of options, and then you can overpower them to be able to get what you want, would be my perspective.
Yeah, and I would follow up with that and say, from my experience, I was in field sales before I actually went into tech sales. I did pharmaceutical sales, and my reps have heard tons of my story time at Pfizer. They actually hate them. But one thing we used to practice was called the stand-up details. The same thing as when you get that connection on the phone is a lot of reps want to sort of vomit on the prospect because they're so excited to finally talk to somebody. They just want to show how smart they are, and they're just really, really excited. And one of my bosses was actually from the South as well too, and he taught me to just slow it down, and like you said, flatter them, flatter be respectful of their time, give them something before you ask them for something, and then when you ask them for something, it's one of those 3 things. Can you help me? Or who can help me? If you can't, and if you don't want to help me, please tell me why. And doing that on the phone is, of course, harder because I can't see your body language. But if you just slow your voice down when you connect with somebody, it's amazing how because they're so used to people just doing 3 to 5 second bursts on a machine gun at them with information, that they'll be really much more energetic to want to talk to you, especially if you flatter them. I totally agree. That works. Another question. Oh, go ahead, Derek. Yep.
I was going to say one thing I think we get wrong, though, and particularly on outbound. Now, in inbound, you can talk about you because they walked on the lot. But in outbound, I think sometimes we all over people. We help you do this. We work with these customers. And it's like, what does that have to do with me?
Exactly.
I think so often we have a lack of relevance, and so we sort of dig in and we want to start pitching immediately, and that's a horrible idea. But it's just such a knee-jerk reaction. You get them right out of boot camp. They know the value props. They could say them in their sleep. And what do? They start vomiting the value props. We. And I think that really hurts success rates as well.
So another question just came in, and this one's asking about how do you deal with the human element and then the AI element in following up with leads? That's a good question. I think someone's actually gone to both of our websites and scouted us out. I'll take this one first, Derek, and then I'll kind of let you follow
Yeah,
up. So,
sure.
there's definitely a need for humans, and artificial intelligence is not there to replace humans. It's actually, if you think about it, it allows organizations to basically go after all their leads when you want to be more hyper focused. So I think you mentioned in our earlier conversation that you guys run an ABM model, and that's where you need to be personalized. That's where it's got to be fully about them, like really on top of them, and really make sure that you're playing to that ego and playing to the need that's there. But with all these other leads that are coming in that may not be that target account, or may not be scored correctly enough to reach up to that handhold or a hand raiser on the MQL side, that's really where an AI assistant like what we have at Conversica can come in to help out. What do you say to that on the human side, Derek?
Yeah, I think my takeaway is that we think about Salesloft and really being authentic with people on the outbound side. You have a different sort of ability with someone who's inbound, because they're inbound, they're showing intent. My perspective is there's only three customer states: unaware, aware, and customer. And the person who comes inbound is already aware, and so they're educated, they're already in their buyer's journey, and you don't necessarily have to, like, they're there, they want to talk to somebody, and I think that's really important. On the outbound side, man, being able to be sincere and authentic in your selling approach is so important. I got a note yesterday. I did a presentation in Toronto, and one of my key ideas was that that there's foxes and hedgehogs, and so often we're dogmatic as sellers, and we're just going to call them into the Stone Ages. We're just going to email them into the Stone Ages. And my takeaway was be a fox. Try email, direct mail, LinkedIn, like just try all the different channels, because we really want to have a conversation with them. And a guy sent me this incredible note last night that said, I'm being a fox, and he cited the presentation, then referenced a blog post where I'd said something that favored his brand, and then closed with another vendor that I'd referenced, Vidyard, as being a customer of theirs. And I sent it out to our entire team, like, they nailed it. Wow, unbelievable. And so I think being really deeply researched and connected on the outbound side is a critical thing that you have to do. If you're not doing it, stats say the person's getting an average of 76 emails a day. If you're talking about the VP of something at one of your target companies, it's probably 3 to 4x that. And hey, I'm a person with company. We work with this, we work with that. Isn't going to stand out in their inbox. It's going to be deleted almost instantly.
Yeah, I agree with that. I totally agree with that. Some of the best prospecting emails and calls I've seen have been people who've done their research and really, they didn't make assumptions. Actually, led with what I try to tell my team, lead with emphatic curiosity. So like, understand that people are busy and really ask a question that's going to make them trigger to want to talk to you. That's excellent. Excellent.
Absolutely.
So just wrapping up here, we're about 5 minutes over, and believe it or not, like a lot of people did stay. My mom actually left because she realized she wasn't going to win anything. Your mom's still staying.
She's busy.
So it's time for last questions before we wrap up this persistence webinar. Going once, going twice. Any thoughts, chants, comments, concerns, conspiracy theories, hopes, wishes, dreams? Anybody? All right, just a quick reminder, there will be a recording of this webinar provided to you. We will be raffling out don't leave just yet. We'll be raffling out 5 of those attendees that are still here listening to my beautiful, lovely voice. And there is a question added right at the very end. Those who wanted to get off and thought they win. This person's definitely making sure. So last question, what kind of phone approach do you recommend once you finally connect with a prospect? I think we already had that one pop in there before. Interesting. All right. Looks like it was a duplicate. Okay. Anyway, so you will be getting a recording of this. And so I'm getting my trusty person saying, no, my other moderator is broken. So there's a question. I'm sorry, everybody. I know I'm having technical difficulty. Always blame the user. So no, we got that one through. I'm telling them right now. I can't see it. My moderator's giving me. Go ahead, Derek. While we try to fix this.
I was going to say, in the attendee chat, there was a question around being able to focus on not hanging up and moving on to the next call.
Oh,
You know,
yeah,
when we
that's
talk
it.
about
That's the one.
volume,
Yep.
when we talk about volume as being a killer, if there's always volume behind it, then it's like, what is my incentive to go deep? What is my incentive to be thoughtful or thorough in the approach? And I don't know if you have any techniques for this. I heard an interesting one, but if you want to lead, then maybe I can follow up on the heels of that.
Yeah. So, there's that push and desire to want to talk and hit your dials, and I think it comes from, first and foremost, if you're metric driven on your outbound or you're on your inbound follow up, and you're looking at like X amount of calls make Y amount of results. That's really sort of old school way of thinking with things. I mean, the gatekeeper is somebody too, and the first thing is everybody you talk with within an organization is worth somebody to someone. And I was just actually having this conversation with one of my reps where he's dealing with higher level individuals, and this lower level AE came in looking for a demo, and he's like, well, I don't want to talk to that person because I'm already dealing with the decision maker. And I was like, no, you want to talk to that person because that person is going to use our product. They're going to be the beneficiary of that product. They need to know how to work with it. And so when you get that gatekeeper on the call, I mean, yes, you don't want to spend an hour pitching the gatekeeper, but you want to make them feel like they're really important. And you want to let them know they're really special, because remember, there's someone special too, and that gatekeeper can one day become the CEO of an organization. Carly Fiorina at one time was an executive assistant who became the CEO of Hewlett Packard. So I just don't judge a book by its cover. Be polite and professional to everyone that you possibly can. Derek, your approach?
Yeah, so something I saw here locally at what used to be Vocalocity, now Vonage for Business, is they were dealing with volume. So they had a ton of different channels. They were foxes from a demand gen perspective, had a ton of different channels coming in. But what they did to incentivize reps, not just hanging up and moving on to the next call and giving a low level of care regardless who picked up, is they actually would grade them A through D on their conversion rates of the ones they claimed out of the Shark Tank. And I thought that was such an interesting approach because if they hit their number, but they worked 100 leads and someone else hit the exact same number and worked 50, what was better? And the answer is probably the person who worked 50, because they were much more efficient in their conversion rate. And so I think there's a lot of value there, and not just trying to cut through the volume with the one call and moving on and hanging up and moving on to the next call, but rather being able to incentivize people for being careful with these leads, for being thorough with the leads, rather than just making sure that everybody got called one time and tomorrow there will be a whole new, brand new batch. And so that's definitely something that I would think about to incentivize people to go a little deeper, to optimize their comp plan, so they are more thorough with accounts and not just sort of going through the motions.
Yeah, and I think the wrap up is, remember, persistence is a journey. It's not about, the number of steps taken on that journey. It's about the journey itself. And I always think of persistence as a pilgrimage. So for those who don't know, and the reason why I don't like, Derek so much is because of Florida State University being Gonzaga, which is a Jesuit university. And, it's a story on that journey of really making the effort all the way through. And so, yes, if you got to do 8 or 9 or 10 attempts to get that conversion, each attempt has to have some form of feeling behind it. It's not just doing that number and then getting the conversion. It's really doing the conversion with some passion and some empathy to really have quality customers. Because remember, for everybody out there, your churn rate starts with your prospecting on outbound and how you treat your inbound leads. And if you don't do a good job on the outbound and you treat your inbound like dirt, you're going to have a high churn rate out on the backside of that sales funnel. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are done here. And again, those who've all attended will raffle off. 5 lucky winners will get the $25 Amazon gift card to spend in your heart's delight of whatever interesting things that are out there. Got a nice big thank you from one of our people out there. Awesome. You're welcome. And there will be a recording of this, and all of you will receive a copy of our 4 Ps Sales Effectiveness Report from 2017. And feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Derek as well too, if you want to. And we'll continue the conversation. Good luck, everybody, and have a good, strong end to the close of the quarter and of the month.
Thank you all.